Before farm to table, before organic anything, American kitchens ran on canned soup, boxed pudding, and sheer audacity. A family of 6 could eat dinner for under $3, and the plate still looked like a magazine cover. Meatloaf frosted like cake, bananas wrapped in ham, salads named after political scandals. These are 25 forgotten dinners from the 1970s, and they were too good to simply vanish. So what made a nation cook this way? And why did it all disappear? Dinner in the early 1970s was as much about stretching a dollar as it was about putting on a show. Canned tuna, spiral noodles, and a can of cream of mushroom soup made tuna twist casserole, turning these humble ingredients into a bubbling, golden brown centerpiece. Grocery ads from 1973 promised it could feed a family of 6 for under $3, and the final flourish came with a layer of crushed potato chips that delivered the signature crunch. Suburban moms recall tossing in frozen peas or a handful of pimentos for color, proof that even thrift could look festive. On weekends, the same kitchens produced frosted meatloaf, a familiar loaf reborn as a party trick. Mashed potatoes were piped thick and high, then browned under the broiler, transforming meatloaf into a cake worthy of applause. The first TV spot for this spectacle aired on ABC in 1974, and the moment of slicing into a frosted meatloaf became a small domestic event. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about turning dinner into a performance. Meanwhile, the tiki wave that swept across America in the late 1960s was still rolling strong. Trader Vic's had grown to 22 U.S. locations by 1969, and home cooks borrowed the sweet and sour glaze for wiki meatballs, rolling ground beef in pineapple-spiked sauce, and serving it with a wink of tropical flair. Even potlucks got a taste of the islands, with meatballs garnished in maraschino cherry red. Tiki flavors made even humble dishes feel exotic. Then came the era of edible engineering. Jell-O 1-2-3, patented in 1970, promised 3 layers from a single mix: gelatin base, creamy mousse, and airy foam. Kids watched the layers form in clear glasses, while parents marveled at the science. It was a dessert, a science experiment, and a badge of kitchen pride all at once. These first 4 dishes set the tone, resourcefulness on a budget, but never without a little spectacle. The 1970s dinner table was a stage, and every casserole or molded salad was a chance to dazzle, even if the ingredients came straight from the pantry. Resourcefulness and showmanship went hand in hand. Cocktail hour in the 1970s meant more than drinks. It was a showcase of clever party snacks built from pantry staples. The deviled ham log, a blend of canned ham and cream cheese rolled in nuts or potato chips and sliced neatly for the tray, became a staple at card nights and block parties. Paired with a Harvey Wallbanger, it reflected a culture where thrift and hospitality went hand in hand. A 1968 bar cart survey revealed that over half of suburban homes kept a cheese log or cheese ball on standby, ready for unexpected guests. Regional favorites brought local flair to the table. In New England, Chinese pie, layered seasoned beef, creamed corn, and mashed potatoes offered a weeknight nod to French-Canadian tourtière. Church cookbooks from Maine to Massachusetts published versions as early as 1972, each promising a filling meal from what was already in the cupboard. For families watching every dollar, stretching a pound of ground beef into 6 servings was no small feat. Porcupine meatballs took stretching further, mixing ground beef with raw rice and simmering in tomato sauce until the grains poked out like tiny quills. Betty Crocker's rice price charts from the 1970s made the case rice was the cheapest way to bulk up dinner. These meatballs simmered in kitchens across the country, filling homes with the scent of tomato and onion. Tomato aspic with veg-all brought spectacle to the salad course. This savory gelatin, bright red and studded with canned mixed vegetables, often appeared as a potluck centerpiece. Veg-all's ad called it a salad you can slice, and a dash of Worcestershire or hot sauce sometimes gave it a Bloody Mary kick. Opinions split, but it always drew attention. Carrot raisin salad, glossy with mayonnaise and dotted with pineapple or coconut, added color and sweetness. Magazine spreads showed it mounded in lettuce cups, promising vitamins and a splash of brightness. Even the simplest ingredients could be transformed, proving that thrift and creativity shaped every dish. Dinner parties in the 1970s often featured dishes that doubled as conversation starters. Few combinations raised more eyebrows than ham-wrapped bananas, baked with a drizzle of mustard and finished under a blanket of hollandaise sauce. This odd couple, featured in a June 1975 issue of Good Housekeeping, was the kind of culinary dare that demanded a bit of hostess bravado. One retired hostess recalls her nerves the first time she served it, watching guests exchange glances before taking that first bite. Yet, as she tells it, the platter always came back empty, proof that novelty sometimes triumphed over skepticism. On other nights, the fondue pot took center stage. By 1975, fondue sets were a booming business, with cookware sales reaching new heights as families gathered around bubbling cheese or chocolate. The ritual was as much about the shared experience as the food itself. Long forks in hand, partygoers dipped cubes of bread, apples, or even canned cocktail sausages, laughing as someone inevitably lost their bread in the pot. A former party guest remembers the gentle competition over who could keep their bread from slipping, and how the fondue pot seemed to slow time, turning dinner into an event rather than a meal. Magazine columns from the era applauded these daring centerpieces, urging readers to try something unexpected, whether it was a pineapple-studded ham ring or a molded seafood salad. The message was clear. Boldness belonged at the table. These dishes were not just about feeding a crowd, they were about making dinner unforgettable. In a decade obsessed with convenience, a little showmanship went a long way. The next wave of branded box recipes was waiting in the wings, but for now, the 1970s table belonged to the brave and the curious. By the mid-1970s, the dinner table was starting to sound less like a family recipe box and more like a branded billboard. Boxed desserts and convenience breads did not just fill the pantry, they rewrote the language of home cooking. The Watergate salad is a case study in this new era of edible branding. Kraft's pistachio pudding box, introduced in 1976, carried a recipe called Pistachio Pineapple Delight. But the salad's real notoriety came when a Chicago food editor, looking for a punchy headline, dubbed it Watergate Salad. Kraft's archivists would later admit they could not trace the name's true origin, but by then the public had spoken. The salad's neon green color, marshmallows, pineapple, and whipped topping made it a fixture at potlucks. And by 1993, Kraft officially embraced the Watergate name in its marketing. A 1976 pudding box panel promised a party in a bowl, and the proof was in the sales. Pistachio pudding spiked in popularity, riding the wave of this newly minted classic. The bread boat was another marvel of 1970s culinary engineering. Grocery ads from 1974 offered bakery rolls by the dozen, just waiting to be hollowed out and stuffed with hamburger, canned soup, and cheese. The result was a fleet of edible boats, each one stretching a pound of ground beef into a meal for a crowd. Family cooks recall the satisfaction of watching kids scoop out the soft insides and pile in the filling. For those on a budget, the bread boat was equal parts thrift and showmanship, a way to turn leftovers into the main event. Then came the quiche moment. Quiche Lorraine, with its French pedigree and creamy custard, swept through brunch tables and PTA meetings. But by 1982, the best-selling satire Real Men Don't Eat Quiche delivered a jab at its perceived pretentiousness. The backlash was swift, but the quiche held on, beloved by those who saw in it a shortcut to sophistication, especially when made with a frozen crust and a can of condensed soup. One family cook summed it up best. We called it quiche, but it was really just eggs, cheese, and whatever else needed using up. Boxed recipes did not just shape what went on the plate, they shaped how people talked about dinner itself. The brand voice grew louder, promising ease, fun, and a little bit of culinary magic for every budget. And while some of these creations have faded from memory, their spirit lives on in every recipe that dares to stretch, stuff, or rebrand the ordinary. Shortcuts in a can were the backbone of the 1970s weeknight survival. When beef prices climbed to $1.29 a pound in 1975, home cooks did not reach for tenderloin. They reached for ground beef, a can opener, and a little imagination. The classic stroganoff, once reserved for special occasions, got a down-to-earth makeover. Instead of ribbons of steak, families browned hamburger in a skillet, stirred in cream of mushroom soup, and finished with a scoop of sour cream. Served over egg noodles, this quick version delivered the same silky richness, minus the fuss and the price tag. Recipe cards from the era show how this swap became the norm, with Campbell's marketing kits urging cooks to stretch your dollar, not your time. Chicken divan followed a similar path from restaurant menu to home kitchen. The original, born at New York's Divan Parisien in the 1920s, called for poached chicken and a delicate Mornay sauce. By the 1970s, the dish had been reimagined for the busy suburban cook. Leftover chicken, frozen broccoli, and a can of cream of chicken soup, all layered in a casserole dish and topped with cheddar and buttered breadcrumbs. Some cooks added water chestnuts for crunch or a dash of curry powder for a nod to global flavors. Magazine ads promised companies coming results with pantry staples and minimal prep. A working family cook from Ohio remembers, "If you had a can of soup and a pound of hamburger, you could make dinner for 6 and still have leftovers for lunch." That kind of ingenuity was more than thrift. It was a quiet act of care, turning whatever was on hand into something warm and filling. These shortcuts were not just about saving time. They made classic dishes accessible every night, no matter the budget. In a world where farm to table is king, it is easy to forget how much comfort and even pride came from a casserole bubbling away, built on ground beef, canned soup, and a little faith in the can opener. One night, dinner meant peeling back the foil on a Salisbury steak TV dinner, sliding the tray into a humming microwave, and waiting for that 3-minute miracle. By 1975, nearly half of American households owned a microwave, and the promise was clear, hot, gravy-smothered meat, mashed potatoes, corn, and even a brownie, all ready faster than a sitcom commercial break. For some, the ritual was as comforting as the meal itself. One TV dinner regular remembers that you could eat with one hand and keep the remote in the other. It felt futuristic. But not every 1970s meal was about speed. Sometimes the kitchen became a stage for small acts of culinary showmanship. The Lipton onion soup mix, for example, hid a secret on the back of its box. Printed in 1954, the box carried a simple recipe. Mix 1 envelope of Lipton onion soup mix with 8 ounces of sour cream and stir until smooth. With that, California dip was born, just 2 ingredients stirred together in seconds, yet it became the backbone of countless parties. Hosts swore by it, not just for its taste, but for the way it made a bowl of chips feel like an invitation to linger. A party host from the era once joked that if you had a tub of sour cream and a packet of soup mix, you were halfway to being the neighborhood's social chair. Then came the grand finale, the flambe. Inspired by Julia Child's televised Crêpes à la Suze in 1964, American home cooks tried their hand at tableside flames. The orange-scented sauce, the dramatic flash of Grand Marnier, the applause that followed. This was dinner as theater, a far cry from the frozen tray. Even if the flames sputtered, the sense of occasion lingered. These moments, whether measured in microwave minutes or the flicker of a flambe, capture the decade's extremes. Dinner could be quick, clever, or downright spectacular, but it always brought people together, one way or another. A school lunchbox in the 1970s was a time capsule of thrift and comfort, packed by hands that knew how to stretch every last crumb. On some days, the simplest treat was a butter and sugar sandwich, soft white bread, cold butter, and a scatter of granulated sugar. It was sweet enough to feel like a secret, yet so plain it slipped under the radar of stricter lunch monitors. According to a kid snack poll from 1970, this humble sandwich ranked alongside peanut butter and jelly as a top favorite, especially in households where dessert was a luxury, not a guarantee. In kitchens shaped by Depression memories, nothing went to waste. Potato peel soup, a recipe passed down from 1940s pamphlets, found its way back into rotation when budgets tightened again. Peels simmered with a little onion and water, coaxing out flavor and fiber from scraps that most would toss. For some families, this soup was a staple on nights when the fridge looked bare. It always arrived at the table with a story of mothers and grandmothers who could make something from almost nothing. Canned salmon was another quiet hero. In 1973, a can cost just under $1. and with a few breadcrumbs and an egg, it became salmon patties fried crisp in the pan. Creamed peas, often from the freezer aisle, stretched the meal further. These dinners were not about impressing anyone. They were about getting through the week, keeping bellies full, and turning a can or a bag of scraps into something warm and familiar. The taste of a bite of butter and sugar, the thrift of peel soup, the quiet pride in stretching salmon, these are the flavors of a generation raised on resourcefulness, long before farm-to-table became a slogan. In the closing stretch of the 1970s dinner parade, the line between sweet and savory blurred in ways only a brand manager could love. Kraft's Velveeta, long a staple of casseroles and nachos, suddenly found itself starring in a fudge recipe printed right on the box. Melted with chocolate and sugar, the cheese gave the fudge a glossy sheen and a texture so smooth, some kids never guessed the secret. The gamble paid off. By 1978, Velveeta sales jumped 12%, and Kraft's annual report credited the fudge campaign with bringing new life to the cheese aisle. A brand archivist once joked, "If it could be spread, melted, or disguised as dessert, we found a way." Meanwhile, the deli counter became a stage for edible showpieces. Olive loaf, pale pink bologna studded with green pimento stuffed olives, was sliced thick and fanned out on party trays, daring guests to pick a favorite color. A 1970s supermarket ad boasted, "Make your sandwich a conversation piece." And for many, olive loaf did just that, whether you loved it or left it behind on the plate. One former deli worker remembers the lunchtime rush. You knew who was ordering bologna, and you knew who was asking for the fancy stuff with the olives. Sometimes, it was the same person, just feeling bold. Bologna itself was the unsung hero of the lunchbox era, a baseline for countless sandwiches. When the Consumer Price Index for meat spiked in 1975, bologna's steady price made it a go-to protein for families watching every penny. Paired with a swipe of yellow mustard, it became a taste memory that still lingers for those who grew up in the era of plastic-wrapped slices and white bread. These final dishes didn't just fill plates, they filled a need for comfort, color, and a little bit of culinary mischief. Born from convenience, built on creativity, remembered through every bite. These dishes shaped how families gathered, saved, and celebrated. Today, as farm-to-table ideals reign, we crave authenticity, but we rarely pause to honor the comforts that fed a generation for mere dollars. Forgotten isn't the same as gone, they were simply replaced. Sometimes progress means leaving flavor memories behind. Which lost taste would you bring back to your table? Share your thoughts below.